In the previous lecture, we have understood default constructor, which is the first type of constructor. Now in this lecture, we will understand parameterized constructor, which is the second type of constructor in C++. So without any further delay, let's get started with this lecture and let's see what are the topics. There is only one topic and the topic name is parameterized constructor. Now let's understand what is parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor is a constructor that can take arguments. As the name itself suggests, constructor is parameterized. This means it has parameters and therefore it can accept arguments. This is in contrast to the default constructor because we know in case of default constructor, we cannot pass arguments because default constructor does not have parameters. But that is not the case with parameterized constructor. Also, it helps in providing initial values to an object at the time of creating the object. So through the parameterized constructor, we can provide initial values to the object and that too at the time of creation of the object. Now to understand this properly and to understand how we can define and use parameterized constructor, let's take one simple C++ program. Here is the example program. I have defined class student with private members, roll number and name. These are public member functions, student and display. This is the constructor, precisely this is the parameterized constructor because this constructor has some parameters. Here we have two parameters R and N, and through these parameters we are passing values to roll number and name, which are private members of this class. Here is the display function, and through display function we can display roll number and name on the screen. Now here is the definition of the main function. Inside this main function, S is the object of class student that I have created. And I have initialized this object with these values. Here I am using the copy initialization to initialize this object S. Why am I calling this copy initialization? Because here you can observe I am using the assignment operator. We know this already. This is the way we initialize an object and this is called the copy initialization. With the help of this syntax, the constructor will be called and these values will be passed to these parameters. And this means indirectly, these variables will be initialized. Roll number will receive 101 and name will receive the string Alice. I hope this is clear to you. And these values are associated to this object. Therefore, we have initialized this object with these values. Now, when we call the display function through the object S, then we know that this roll number will be replaced by 101 and name will be replaced by Alice. So when we execute this program, we will get the output roll number 101 and name Alice. Now I would like to mention that this is not the only way of initialization. This is even not the preferred way of initialization. We should not use the copy initialization to initialize objects. We have another way of initialization which is called the direct initialization. This is how the direct initialization looks like. We need to provide values directly to the object. This is how we can follow the direct initialization. This is the preferred way of initialization. Now we know, again when we execute this program, we will get the same output, roll number 101 and name Alice. We have just changed the method of initialization. The entire code is exactly the same as before. Now what happens when we do not initialize this object? That is, we do not provide these values and we simply create this object like this. If we create this object without initializing it, then the default constructor must execute. At this moment, the parameterized constructor will not execute because we need to pass values to these parameters in order to call this constructor. But here we are not initializing this object, therefore the default constructor must execute. But there is no default constructor that we have defined in this class. We learned this already in the last lecture that if we do not provide the default constructor on our own, then the compiler will provide the default constructor. Now, what do you think? What happens in this case? Does the compiler provide the default constructor to us? No. The answer to this question is no. Compiler will not provide the default constructor on its own. This is because we already have the parameterized constructor in our class. Default constructor is provided by the compiler when there is no constructor in the class. But we have the parameterized constructor. Therefore, the default constructor will not be provided by the compiler. As there is no default constructor, therefore, we will get error from the compiler. So if we only have the parameterized constructor, then we need to pass arguments via this object to initialize the parameterized constructor. That is to provide values to the parameters of the parameterized constructor. I hope this idea is clear to you. So with this, we have properly understood parameterized constructor, and this means we are done with this topic and we are done with this lecture. Okay friends, this is it for now. Thank you for watching this lecture. I will see you in the next one.